It's hard to say, to put it into words. I think it's just, in a way, the composer is the first member of the audience, or at least I think that's how it should work. I mean, so if something doesn't satisfy my own ear, I won't put it down. And I feel very strongly, to really make sure that what I'm writing is honestly in sync with my inner ear, and then I feel like can I tell if someone is playing the right notes in my piece or not? I think if I can't, then I'm sort of a fraud. So, so that's really important for me. And one of the scales that I used in this is the so-called octatonic scale, which is since Stravinsky, it has its place in jazz. A lot of people use it, but I think one of the reasons I like it is because I find myself sort of stumbling on it just by instinct, rather than having to sort of write out the scale and do it in a sort of artificial way. So that sort of convinces me that my ear is really actually locking onto this in an authentic way. I have a lot of commissions that come to me these days that ask for specific, things. One thing I've done is set a lot of Chinese poetry, which I have, enjoyed doing. And I enjoy setting text just in general. Going back to the idea of, the the blank slate and not knowing where to start. A text is a perfect framework because it just gives you so much information about form and expression and all kinds of things. So whatever language it's in, I just really enjoy writing, writing music with text. And obviously there's some specific issues with Chinese poetry because of its, the tonal nature of it, and how it was pronounced now versus, what it would have sounded like during the Tang Dynasty, without the intervening over 1,000 years of linguistic evolution and all this stuff. So that's one aspect of Chinese culture I've definitely been interacting with. Also, writing things for Chinese instruments has been something I've been doing a bit of recently. And one nice thing is that many of the Chinese instruments have sort of been quote unquote reformed over the past, since the 70s, 60s, 70s, brought into line with, equal tempered tuning and things. Obviously there's been some loss in that regard too, in terms of traditional tunings and things. But for a composer, the conservatories all have these majors coming out now that play Chinese instruments, and they can read, Western musical notation fluently, and they need repertoire. And so actually it's great from the perspective of a composer. So I've written several pieces that combine Western and Chinese instruments. Also very high playing level over there. So that's another thing. Using Chinese folk songs is another thing I've been asked to do. Some sort of more occasional arrangements, some trying to, use them as material for more serious compositions. So I bought these, books that are this thick of Chinese folk songs written out in what they call jianpu notation, which is basically solfege using numbers. Yeah, so all those things have just sort of, been a natural part of my environment, and people approach me and ask me to do these projects, and I don't find any, dissonance between that and my, creative aspirations. So that's been something very productive for me lately. I love to be back here, actually. San Antonio, in a way, the longer I've been away, the more interesting it seems to me. Just growing up, Mexican food seemed very unremarkable, but having been gone for years, I just want to come and eat tacos every day. You sort of take it for granted until you realize that, it's actually pretty good. And also, the musical education I had here, actually, as a young man was really, looking back, so wonderful. It was a great sort of, I wouldn't say it was a big fish in a small pond, but definitely growing up somewhere like New York or Beijing, where there's such an unbelievable amount of talent and just things happening all over the place. It was really sort of a nice, supportive, but not overwhelming musical environment in which to grow up. But I had such excellent teachers on viola and for composition. And yeah, I look very fondly back on my growing up here, and it's great to be back. As I get older, it becomes less and less of a shock, I think. I don't know if that's because I'm just more, calm and or that I have a better idea of what I'm putting down and can more reliably expect what it's going to sound like or something. But lately I feel like it kind of just sounds like what I thought it would, um, and it's very satisfying. I mean, when I was a younger person, I think I got much more intense and nervous about these situations. And I've partly, you learn not to go to the first rehearsal and that kind of thing, because you're just going to get in the way, especially with professional musicians. You just need to let them do their thing and figure it out before you start trying to interfere. But yeah, I think it'll be great. I have no worries about it. I mean, a lot of composers or artists in general feel like experimentation is a really important part of the creative process. And I recently heard a quote. I think it was Verez who said, "My experiments end up in the wastebasket." And I thought that was I felt very sympathetic with that idea, because I feel like a composer, of course you try different things out in your creative space, but I feel like if you're really giving something to someone, asking them to learn it and put time into realizing it, it's okay to get it wrong, but you should at least think you know what you've done. I think when someone might say, well, there would never be any innovation otherwise, but did Wagner really not know what Tristan und Isolde was going to be like after he wrote it? It was very new, but I'm pretty sure he knew what it was. So I don't have much sympathy with the idea of trying things out. I feel like you should try things out on your own, and then only put something in front of someone when you think you've gotten it right. I mean, you can definitely have sort of an aesthetic shift in how you view what you've done, or as time passes. I mean, it works both ways. Sometimes it seems you come back to something I'd written 10 years ago and I'm like, wow, how did I do this? This is pretty good. Or the opposite is definitely true. Something I thought was good, and then going back later, it's like, oh, this is really kind of empty. But maybe that's more of an inner progression than yeah. I very much sympathize with the um, desire to have some sort of framework through which to listen to something new. Um, and I think, something that classical music in the common practice era had was, a common language and common musical forms, which still exists today in popular music. I mean, verse, chorus, break, verse, chorus. I mean, that's basically how a pop song goes. And when someone listens to it, they sort of know what to expect, and then, the song can modify this basic plan in ways that people can still follow. And I think really the situation with sonata and rondo and these classical forms was analogous, and we've lost something, not having that sort of shared culture anymore. Not that it was ever a truly universal thing, but in its place and time, I think it was something that created musical meaning for the audience, because if you have a plan, especially a plan which has as much nuance and flexibility as the so-called sonata form plan, which is what many opening first movements of symphonies or string quartets or whatever would have been written in, the composer's ability to play off those expectations really can not only help the audience find their way through a new piece, but also create a lot of meaning as the composer plays and both defies and fulfills those fixed expectations. So I teach a class actually that I designed that's all about the development of the sonata form after Beethoven, which in traditional music history, that sort of was its decline period. Once it sort of just became, well, it was just something in the conservatory textbook and it wasn't really artistically legitimate anymore, blah, blah, blah. But I strongly disagree with this assessment. And my class, follows sonata form is used all the way through composers like Shostakovich into the 20th century. So as a listener, that's very important for me. So slowly that sort of made its way into my compositions as well. So really, the second and third movements of this piece I wrote are both in some kind of a sonata form. So if someone's up on that way of listening, then I think that could definitely be something to follow along. just following up, I mean, it really comes so much from my own experience as an audience member, especially for, a composer like Dvorak, a lot of chamber music, mostly very good. I haven't heard all of it. So, if there's a Dvorak string quartet on a concert I've never heard before, but I'm pretty sure, what its basic formal outline is going to be, and I can be just so delighted to sit there and listen to the specific way this one tweaks that design. It's just very satisfying and helps me stay engaged with the music. So I feel the need for that same thing in my creative life, and maybe that's why I keep continuing to turn back to different classical forms.